Jasmine Washington stared at her phone, finger hovering above the send button. The email would terminate 15 careers. Outside her private jet's window, the airline staff who had humiliated her 20 minutes ago still stood on the tarmac. She pressed send, tucked away her phone, and smiled. Before we dive into this incredible story of justice served, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button to join our community of storytellers and truth seekers. Now, let's rewind to see how Jasmine Washington went from being humiliated to changing an entire company's future in just one flight. The morning had started like any other for Jasmine Washington. At 42, she had built Washington Innovations from a small startup operating out of her Harlem apartment into a Fortune 500 company specializing in cutting-edge cybersecurity software. Today marked another milestone in her remarkable journey, a flight to San Francisco for an acquisition meeting that would potentially double her company's value. Standing in her penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, Jasmine carefully selected her outfit. Nothing flashy or ostentatious, a charcoal gray pantsuit, cream silk blouse, and simple pearl earrings her grandmother had given her for her college graduation. Understated elegance had always been her style. Designer labels were tucked discreetly inside, invisible to the casual observer but unmistakable to those who recognized quality. "Angela, can you confirm the meeting details one more time?" Jasmine spoke into her phone while gathering her documents. "Everything set, Ms. Washington," her assistant replied. "The Transcontinental Holdings Board will meet you at 2 p.m. Your presentation materials have been prepared in duplicate and the acquisition paperwork is ready for signatures." Jasmine felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. This deal had been 6 months in the making. Perfect. I'll review everything on the flight. The town car arrived promptly at 7 a.m. for her 9 a.m. flight. Jasmine preferred arriving early, a habit formed during her childhood when her mother worked 3 jobs but still made time to drive Jasmine to school an hour early for extra study time. Education and punctuality, her mother always said. These are weapons they can never take from you. Those weapons had served Jasmine well through MIT, where she'd been one of only 7 black women in her engineering class, and later as she climbed the corporate ladder before launching her own company. Each step had come with its own unique challenges: the venture capitalists who spoke to her male assistant instead of her during pitch meetings, the clients who assumed she was the secretary, the competitors who spread rumors questioning her technical capabilities. Yet here she stood, a billionaire entrepreneur whose software protected government agencies and multinational corporations from cyber threats. Today's acquisition would be another victory, another ceiling shattered. At the airport, Jasmine breezed through security with her TSA pre-check and headed toward her gate. She noticed the subtle glances from other travelers, the quick double takes, the evaluating looks. After 2 decades in the business world, she developed a thick skin and an observant eye. The gate area for first-class passengers was already filling up as she took a seat near the window. A white businessman in his 50s loudly discussed his golf handicap on a phone call. 2 middle-aged white women compared their recent European vacations. A young white tech entrepreneur she recognized from industry events tapped furiously on his laptop. Jasmine was the only black person in the waiting area. When boarding began, she queued up with the other first-class passengers. The gate agent barely glanced at her boarding pass, her eyes lingering instead on the passengers behind Jasmine. "Enjoy your flight," the agent said flatly, without making eye contact. Aboard the plane, Jasmine located her seat, 12A, a window seat in first class. As she stored her carry-on in the overhead compartment, a flight attendant with "Bradley Thompson" on his name tag brushed past her without acknowledgement, turning immediately to assist an elderly white man with his luggage. "Can I get you anything, sir? Water? Juice? Champagne?" Bradley offered warmly. When he turned to Jasmine minutes later, his smile tightened. "Boarding pass?" he asked curtly. Jasmine showed him her ticket. Bradley nodded and moved on without offering refreshments. Taking her seat, Jasmine removed her laptop and presentation materials. She had 4 hours to make final preparations for the meeting that could transform her company's future. She tried to focus, but couldn't help noticing that Bradley was now cheerfully pouring champagne for the white passengers in the rows around her. Jasmine pulled out her phone to call Angela one last time before takeoff. "Everything good on your end?" Angela asked. "Just some of the usual," Jasmine replied quietly. "But nothing I haven't handled before. I'm excited about this deal, though I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little nervous." "You've got this, Ms. Washington. You always do." Jasmine smiled, grateful for Angela's confidence. As other passengers continued boarding, she returned to reviewing her notes, mentally preparing for one of the biggest business deals of her career, unaware that the real challenge of her day was about to begin. The plane was fully boarded, the overhead bins were closed, and the cabin door was about to shut when a commotion erupted at the entrance. A middle-aged white man in an expensive but rumpled suit burst through the doorway, breathing heavily. Sorry. Traffic was a nightmare, he announced to no one in particular, loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. The head flight attendant, a blonde woman whose name tag read Veronica Miller, rushed forward with a practiced smile. "Not to worry, Mr. Whitfield. We're just glad you made it." Jasmine glanced up briefly before returning to her documents. Late passengers were a common occurrence, hardly worth attention. Maxwell Whitfield, however, demanded attention. After Veronica checked his boarding pass, his booming voice filled the cabin again. 12B. A middle seat? There must be some mistake. I always fly by the window. I do apologize, Mr. Whitfield, Veronica said, her voice dripping with sympathy. The flight is completely full today. Maxwell scanned the first-class cabin with obvious displeasure until his eyes landed on Jasmine. Something in his expression shifted. "Let me see what I can do," Veronica whispered to him, though loud enough for Jasmine to hear. Moments later, Veronica approached Jasmine's seat with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Excuse me, ma'am. May I see your boarding pass?" Without looking up from her work, Jasmine reached into her bag and handed over her boarding pass. Veronica glanced at it briefly, her expression hardening. "There seems to be a system error," Veronica announced. "This seat is actually reserved." Jasmine finally looked up, her expression calm but confused. "I don't understand. I checked in online yesterday and selected this seat." "Yes, well," Veronica replied, her tone now dismissive, "these things happen. The computer system sometimes glitches. I'll need you to relocate." Jasmine took her boarding pass back and examined it. "My boarding pass clearly shows 12A. I paid for this seat." By now, Maxwell Whitfield had approached and was standing expectantly in the aisle, his carry-on in hand. Other passengers were beginning to stare. "Is there a problem?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer he wanted to hear. "No problem at all, Mr. Whitfield," Veronica assured him before turning back to Jasmine with a hardened expression. "Ma'am, I need you to gather your belongings now. You're delaying our departure." Jasmine took a deep breath. She'd faced situations like this before and knew escalation rarely helped. Still, this was blatantly wrong. "I'd like to see the passenger manifest," she requested calmly. "If there's been an error, I'm sure we can resolve it professionally." 2 more flight attendants appeared. One, a young man with sandy hair whose tag read Tyler Benson, whispered something to Veronica. The other, a middle-aged woman named Kimberly Adams, stood with arms crossed, glaring at Jasmine as if she were causing an unnecessary scene. "Ma'am," Veronica said, her voice now loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, "if you continue to be difficult, we'll need to call security." From the row behind her, Jasmine heard a white woman mutter, "These people always want to make everything about them." Jasmine felt a familiar heat rise in her chest but maintained her composed demeanor. She discreetly removed her phone from her bag and pressed record. "I'm simply asking to see verification of the seating arrangement," she said evenly. I've shown you my boarding pass confirming my seat assignment. The pilot emerged from the cockpit, a tall man with graying temples whose name badge read Raymond Brooks. Without asking for context or examining Jasmine's boarding pass, he immediately sided with his crew. "Ma'am, my flight attendants have determined there's a seating issue. I need you to comply with their instructions so we can depart on time." Jasmine looked around the cabin. Every pair of eyes was on her. Some passengers looked embarrassed or uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. Maxwell Whitfield stood smugly in the aisle, keys jingling impatiently in his hand. "May I see your boarding pass, sir?" Jasmine asked him directly. Before Maxwell could respond, Veronica stepped between them. "That's not necessary. Sir, please take your seat in 12A. We'll find alternative accommodation for this passenger." "I'd like the names and employee numbers of everyone involved in this decision," Jasmine stated firmly, still recording on her phone. "Are you threatening my staff?" Captain Brooks demanded, his face reddening. "I'm documenting an unusual situation that appears to violate company policy and possibly federal law," Jasmine replied calmly. Veronica's hand shot out, blocking Jasmine's phone. "Recording is not permitted during critical phases of flight." "We're still at the gate," Jasmine pointed out. "And FAA regulations permit recording that isn't disruptive." A uniformed security officer appeared at the cabin entrance. "Is there a problem here?" Captain Brooks pointed at Jasmine. "This passenger is refusing crew instructions and creating a disturbance." Jasmine, recognizing the futility of the situation, slowly gathered her belongings. "I'll comply under protest," she said clearly, still recording. "Please note that I have a valid first-class ticket for seat 12A, which is being reassigned without explanation." As she stood, she looked each crew member in the eye. Veronica Miller, flight attendant. Tyler Benson, flight attendant. Kimberly Adams, flight attendant. Raymond Brooks, captain. Bradley Thompson, flight attendant, she recited, committing their names to memory. "You won't need those names," Veronica snapped, her professional facade cracking. "We'll see," Jasmine replied quietly as she followed the security officer toward economy class. Behind her, she heard Maxwell Whitfield settle comfortably into her seat with a satisfied sigh. Economy class was packed to capacity. The security officer led Jasmine to the middle seat in row 32, sandwiched between an overweight man who spilled into her space and a teenager with headphones blaring music loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Sorry about the tight fit," the officer muttered, though his tone lacked genuine sympathy. Jasmine squeezed into the seat, her knees pressed against the seat in front. Her laptop, essential for preparing for her acquisition meeting, remained tucked in her bag. There was simply no room to open it in the cramped space. "Excuse me," she said to the man beside her, "would you mind if I used the armrest for a moment?" He grunted and shifted slightly, allowing her a few inches to situate herself. The teenager on her other side didn't even remove his headphones. From the galley area just behind her row, Jasmine could hear flight attendants talking in lowered voices. "Can you believe the nerve?" It was Kimberly's voice. "Acting like she owned the place." "They always do," another voice responded. "First time in first class and thinks she's entitled to special treatment." Jasmine closed her eyes briefly, focusing on her breathing. This wasn't the first time she'd experienced such treatment, though it had been years since it had been this blatant. She'd fought too hard to let this derail her day, especially with the Transcontinental Holdings meeting looming. Opening her eyes, she noticed several economy passengers staring at her, whispering among themselves. One woman nudged her husband and pointed discreetly. "Isn't that the woman from Forbes? The tech CEO?" Jasmine pretended not to hear, though the recognition was spreading. Another passenger pulled up a magazine from the seat pocket, comparing the cover photo to Jasmine's face. The flight took off, the cramped conditions in economy making the turbulence feel even worse. When the seatbelt sign turned off, Jasmine attempted to retrieve her presentation materials from her bag, but there simply wasn't enough room to work effectively. A critical realization hit her. Her checked luggage contained her backup presentation materials and a custom secure drive with proprietary data that Transcontinental's board would need to see. Those materials were now inaccessible in the cargo hold, while her first-class seat would have provided easy access to the overhead bin. Through the gap between seats, she could see into first class where Bradley was providing attentive service to Maxwell Whitfield, who now occupied her seat. Bradley offered him a hot towel, took his drink order, and engaged in friendly conversation. "First time to San Francisco, sir?" Bradley asked warmly. "Oh no," Maxwell laughed. "I have property there. Heading out to check on some investments." Jasmine watched as Bradley brought Maxwell a glass of champagne that hadn't been offered to other passengers. The preferential treatment was unmistakable. After 30 minutes of futile attempts to work in her confined space, Jasmine pressed the call button. 10 minutes passed before Tyler responded. "Yes," he asked curtly. "I need to access my carry-on in first class," Jasmine explained. "It contains essential business materials that I wasn't able to gather when I was relocated." Tyler's expression hardened. "All carry-ons must remain stowed during flight unless there's an emergency. This is important. I have a major business meeting immediately after landing." "So does everyone," he replied dismissively. "You should have thought about that before causing a scene." As he turned to leave, Bradley passed by with a drink cart. He paused to whisper something to Tyler, both of them glancing back at Jasmine with smirks before continuing down the aisle. The humiliation burned, but Jasmine kept her expression neutral. She'd learned long ago that displaying emotion often played into stereotypes. Instead, she channeled her frustration into action. A young white woman seated across the aisle leaned over. "That was completely unprofessional of them," she said quietly. "I'm Emily Parker. I saw everything that happened during boarding." Jasmine nodded appreciatively. "Jasmine Washington. Thank you for saying something. I recognize you," Emily continued. "I attended your keynote at the Women in Tech conference last year. Your speech about breaking barriers inspired me to switch my major to computer science." Under different circumstances, Jasmine would have engaged more, but her mind was racing. She pulled out her phone, activated the plane's Wi-Fi, and began researching the airline's corporate structure. Who owned this airline? Who sat on their board? What were their financials? Who were their major shareholders? As she dug deeper, she texted her executive team. "Need urgent research on ownership structure of Atlantic Airways. Particularly interested in parent company and board connections." Within minutes, responses began flooding in from her team. Jasmine's expression remained impassive, but inside, a plan was forming, one that would transform this humiliation into an opportunity for systemic change. Midway through the flight, the atmosphere in economy class shifted subtly. Emily Parker, the young woman seated across from Jasmine, had been discreetly speaking with surrounding passengers. Like ripples in a pond, awareness began spreading through the cabin. "That's Jasmine Washington," a man whispered loudly 2 rows back. "My company uses her cybersecurity software. She's worth billions," another passenger added. "I read about her in Business Week last month." "Wait, they kicked her out of first class. Her company is bigger than this entire airline." The murmurs grew, with passengers shooting glances at Jasmine, no longer looks of curiosity or disdain, but of recognition and incredulity. Some pulled out phones, searching her name, then looking back with widened eyes. Tiffany Rogers, a flight attendant serving economy, overheard the conversations while distributing drinks. Her face paled as she heard Jasmine's name repeated with increasing certainty. She quickly abandoned her beverage service and rushed to the front galley. "Veronica," she whispered urgently to the head flight attendant. "We have a serious problem." "What now?" Veronica snapped, arranging meal trays for first class. "The woman you relocated from first class? I think she's Jasmine Washington." "Who?" Veronica barely looked up from her task. "Jasmine Washington. The tech CEO. From Washington Innovations. The billionaire. Veronica scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. Why would someone like that be flying commercial? Bradley, who had been preparing drinks nearby, froze. Washington Innovations. The cybersecurity company? Tiffany nodded vigorously. Everyone in economy is talking about it. They're saying we kicked a billionaire CEO out of her rightful seat. It's probably just someone who looks like her, Veronica dismissed, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. Bradley wasn't convinced. He slipped into the cockpit to check the passenger manifest more thoroughly, scrolling through the names until he found it, Washington, Jasmine E. The listing included her frequent flyer status, Diamond Elite, the highest tier possible, with over 3 million miles accumulated. Oh my God, Bradley whispered, his face draining of color. He rushed back to the galley where Veronica and Tiffany were still debating. It's her. It's definitely her. She has Diamond Elite status. That's impossible, Veronica insisted, grabbing the manifest from him. As she read the information, her confident demeanor crumbled. Why didn't anyone tell me? You didn't exactly ask before removing her, Tiffany pointed out. Bradley ran a hand through his hair. The CEO of Washington Innovations. They protect the Pentagon systems, for crying out loud. And we put her in economy to give her seat to Maxwell Whitfield. The real estate developer with a history of customer complaints. In the cockpit, Captain Brooks was receiving the news with growing alarm. Are you absolutely certain? He asked Tyler, who had delivered the information. Positive, sir. It's all over social media already. Passengers are tweeting about it. Captain Brooks closed his eyes briefly, envisioning the damage to his career. 25 years of flying without incident, and now this. Meanwhile, Jasmine's phone buzzed with an incoming message from her executive assistant, research complete on Atlantic Airways. Owned by Transcontinental Holdings since 2022. Currently 87% ownership stake. Jasmine stared at the screen, the pieces falling into place. Transcontinental Holdings, the very company she was flying to San Francisco to acquire. The company whose board she would be meeting in just hours. The company that, if her acquisition succeeded, she would effectively own. A slow smile spread across her face as she typed a response to her team, interesting coincidence. Continue with acquisition plans. No changes. She added a second message, send legal team to SFO. Meeting at terminal upon landing. As Jasmine formulated her strategy, her phone continued to receive messages from her team, each one confirming what she already suspected. This coincidence had handed her unprecedented leverage in the upcoming negotiations. In first class, oblivious to the growing crisis, Maxwell Whitfield enjoyed his third complimentary drink, sprawled comfortably in Jasmine's rightful seat. Have you ever experienced discrimination that ended up backfiring on the perpetrator? Comment number 1 if you've witnessed justice served in a situation like Jasmine's, or number 2 if you're still waiting for your moment of vindication. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're enjoying Jasmine's strategic approach to this injustice. The real question now is, what will Jasmine do with this newfound power? Is she plotting revenge, or does she have something more transformative in mind? And how will the airline staff react when they realize the magnitude of their mistake? Let's find out what happens when the plane lands. The mood aboard the aircraft had transformed dramatically. In economy class, passengers whispered and pointed phones discreetly toward Jasmine. In first class, the crew huddled in the galley, faces drawn with concern as they formulated a desperate plan to salvage the situation. 40 minutes before landing, Veronica Miller smoothed her uniform and approached row 32 with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. She crouched in the aisle beside Jasmine, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Ms. Washington, there seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding, she began, her tone suddenly honeyed and deferential. We've realized there was a glitch in our computer system that caused confusion with your seat assignment. Jasmine looked up from her phone calmly, her expression revealing nothing. "I'd like to personally escort you back to your rightful seat in first class," Veronica continued, now loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "The entire crew extends our sincerest apologies for the inconvenience." Jasmine regarded her for a long moment. "That's kind of you, Veronica, but I've settled in here. Moving again would only cause more disruption." Veronica's smile faltered. This wasn't the response she had anticipated. "I insist, Ms. Washington. We want to make this right." "The time to make it right was when I showed you my boarding pass," Jasmine replied evenly. "I'm comfortable completing the flight where I am." Veronica glanced nervously at the watching passengers. "Perhaps I could offer complimentary miles or an upgrade on your return flight." "That won't be necessary." Flustered by Jasmine's calm refusal, Veronica retreated to the galley. Minutes later, Captain Brooks's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I'd like to personally apologize for a misunderstanding that occurred during boarding regarding one of our valued passengers. Here at Atlantic Airways, we pride ourselves on customer service, and we're working to address the situation. We'll be landing in San Francisco in approximately 35 minutes. Current weather is sunny, 68 degrees. The announcement, rather than smoothing things over, only drew more attention to the situation. Passengers throughout the cabin now openly discussed the incident, many recording videos or typing on their phones. Bradley appeared next with a drink cart, stopping at Jasmine's row. "Ms. Washington, complimentary beverages for you. Anything you'd like, champagne, perhaps?" "Just water, thank you," Jasmine replied. As Bradley poured the water with exaggerated care, he leaned in. "I just want you to know that I personally treat everyone equally. What happened earlier doesn't reflect my values." "Interesting," Jasmine responded. "I noticed a distinct difference in how you greeted first-class passengers during boarding." Bradley's face flushed. He placed the water on her tray and quickly moved on. In first class, Maxwell Whitfield had been watching the commotion with growing unease. After a whispered conversation with Tyler, he understood the gravity of the situation. Attempting to save face, he ordered a glass of premium champagne and had it sent back to Jasmine with a handwritten note, with compliments from 12A. Jasmine received the glass, read the note, and promptly returned it untouched with her own message, "I prefer seats to beverages." The champagne returned to first class, where Maxwell slumped in his seat, aware of the disapproving glances from fellow passengers who had now pieced together the story. Emily Parker, who had witnessed everything from her seat across from Jasmine, leaned over. "You're handling this with incredible grace," she said admiringly. "Would it be okay if I gave you my contact information? I'd be happy to provide a witness statement if you need one." "Thank you, Emily." "That's thoughtful of you," Jasmine replied, accepting the business card Emily offered. Other passengers began approaching Jasmine's row during trips to the restroom, offering similar support. A retired attorney handed her his card with "Witnessed entire incident" scribbled on the back. A social media influencer discreetly mentioned she had recorded parts of the initial confrontation. Jasmine thanked each of them graciously while continuing to work on her phone. Between responding to messages from her executive team and preparing for her meeting with Transcontinental Holdings, she received a notification that made her pause. "Ms. Washington," the message from her head of communications read, "Video of the incident has been anonymously submitted to multiple media outlets. Reports expected to break within the hour. Would you like us to prepare a statement?" "No statement needed at this time," Jasmine replied. "Let the footage speak for itself." As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, the crew made increasingly desperate attempts to appease Jasmine. Kimberly offered warm towels. Tyler brought extra pillows. Tiffany asked if there was anything special she could arrange upon landing. Jasmine declined each offer with the same measured politeness, neither accepting their sudden attention nor displaying anger at their previous treatment. Her calm demeanor seemed to unnerve the crew more than any outburst could have. "Prepare for landing," Captain Brooks announced, his voice noticeably tense. Jasmine secured her seatbelt and gazed out the small economy window at the approaching San Francisco skyline. In just a few hours, she would sit across from Transcontinental's board of directors with knowledge they didn't realize she possessed. As the wheels touched down on the runway, one thought crystallized in her mind: this incident would lead to changes far beyond what anyone on this flight could imagine. The plane taxied to the gate with unusual precision, as if Captain Brooks was attempting to compensate for earlier mistakes through perfect technical execution. When the seatbelt sign dinged off, Veronica's voice came over the intercom with forced cheerfulness. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to San Francisco International Airport. Local time is 11:42 a.m. with clear skies and beautiful weather. We'd like to invite Ms. Jasmine Washington to deplane first. Ms. Washington, please proceed to the front of the aircraft at your convenience." Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Passengers exchanged knowing glances, many recording the announcement on their phones. Jasmine remained seated, organizing her belongings unhurriedly. "Ms. Washington?" Veronica prompted again over the intercom. "You're welcome to exit first." Jasmine looked up and spoke clearly, knowing nearby passengers would hear. "Thank you, but I'll deplane in the normal sequence. No special treatment is necessary." The organized deplaning process began, with first-class passengers exiting first. Maxwell Whitfield hurried past without making eye contact, his earlier swagger replaced by hunched shoulders and a quickened pace. When economy passengers were finally permitted to leave, Jasmine moved with the flow, thanking Emily Parker and other supportive travelers as they parted ways. At the jet bridge, an unwelcome welcoming committee awaited. Derek Coleman, Atlantic Airways regional manager, stood clutching an elaborate bouquet of flowers. Beside him, two nervous-looking customer service representatives held gift bags emblazoned with the airline's logo. "Ms. Washington," Derek stepped forward with an outstretched hand and an expansive smile. "On behalf of Atlantic Airways, please accept our most profound apologies for the misunderstanding that occurred on your flight today." Jasmine shook his hand briefly but didn't accept the flowers. "I appreciate you taking the time to meet me, Mr. Coleman." "Please, call me Derek," he insisted, still extending the bouquet. "We've arranged a complimentary car service to take you to your destination, and these bags contain some small tokens of our appreciation: premium frequent flyer miles, airport lounge access, and vouchers for future travel." Jasmine regarded him steadily. "Thank you, but I have transportation arranged. I do have some questions about your airline's policies, if you have a moment." Derek's smile faltered slightly. "Of course, absolutely. Could you explain Atlantic Airways' policy regarding seat assignments for passengers with confirmed bookings?" Jasmine asked, her tone conversational but precise. "Well, Derek shifted uncomfortably. Our policy is to honor all confirmed seat assignments except in cases of aircraft changes or operational necessity." "And was there an aircraft change on today's flight?" "No, there wasn't." "Was there an operational necessity that required relocating me specifically?" Derek glanced at his colleagues for support. Finding none, he cleared his throat. "I understand there was confusion about the seating arrangement." "There was no confusion, Mr. Coleman," Jasmine interrupted calmly. "I had a confirmed first-class seat assignment which your staff reallocated to another passenger without valid cause. My question is whether this reallocation followed company policy." Well, we're still investigating the exact circumstances," Derek stammered. "Does Atlantic Airways have a policy regarding how to resolve seating conflicts when they arise?" Jasmine continued. "Yes, our protocol is to check documentation and refer to the passenger manifest," he replied, visibly sweating now. "Interesting. No one checked the manifest until after I was relocated. Would you say that follows protocol?" Derek's professional facade was crumbling. "Ms. Washington, I want to assure you that what happened doesn't reflect our company values. We're taking this very seriously." "I have one more question," Jasmine said. "Does Atlantic Airways provide anti-bias training to its employees?" Before Derek could formulate a response, commotion erupted behind him. A cluster of people with cameras and microphones was approaching rapidly, reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the incident. Ms. Washington. Channel 7 News. Can you comment on the discrimination you experienced today? Ms. Washington. Is it true you were removed from first class to accommodate a white passenger? Derek blanched as cameras swung between him and Jasmine. Please, this is a private matter we're addressing with our valued customer. It ceased being private when your staff publicly humiliated me, Jasmine stated, her voice calm but carrying clearly enough for the microphones to pick up. More airline executives appeared, rushing toward the growing media presence with looks of panic. A distinguished older man in an expensive suit pushed forward. Ms. Washington, I'm Richard Camden, VP of Customer Experience for Atlantic Airways. Please, let's discuss this in our private lounge. Mr. Camden, Jasmine acknowledged with a nod. I appreciate the offer, but I have an important meeting to attend. I'm sure your PR team will be in touch with mine to address this incident appropriately. We'd like to offer compensation immediately, Richard pressed. A full refund, additional miles, complimentary first-class tickets. What I'd appreciate more than compensation is accountability, Jasmine replied. I've documented today's events thoroughly, including multiple witness statements. I'll review any formal response your company provides. At least allow us to arrange transportation for you, Richard pleaded, acutely aware of the recording devices capturing every word. That won't be necessary, Jasmine said, gesturing toward the terminal entrance where her assistant Angela now stood with two members of her legal team. I have everything I need. As Jasmine walked away from the flustered airline executives, a reporter called out one final question, Ms. Washington, how do you plan to respond to this treatment? Jasmine paused briefly, turning back with a composed expression. Appropriately, she stated simply, before continuing toward her waiting team. Behind her, she left chaos, executives issuing urgent phone calls, media representatives demanding statements, and Derek still awkwardly holding the rejected bouquet of apology flowers. Angela greeted Jasmine with a tablet displaying the latest updates. The video's gone viral, she informed her quietly. 3 million views and counting. Your legal team is here, and the car is waiting. The meeting with Transcontinental Holdings is still on schedule for 2 p.m. Perfect, Jasmine replied, the hint of a smile playing at her lips. Let's proceed as planned. As her team escorted her through the terminal, Jasmine's phone buzzed with messages from board members, industry colleagues, and even competitors expressing outrage at her treatment. But Jasmine's focus remained squarely on the upcoming meeting, where the real consequences of today's incident would begin to unfold. The gleaming glass and steel headquarters of Transcontinental Holdings dominated the San Francisco skyline, its 50-story tower reflecting the afternoon sun. Jasmine's car pulled into the private underground garage precisely at 1:45 p.m., where a corporate representative waited to escort her directly to the executive elevator. Ms. Washington, welcome to Transcontinental, the young man greeted her. The board is assembled in the Platinum Conference Room on the 49th floor. Mr. Townsend asked me to escort you personally. Thank you, Jasmine replied, using the brief elevator ride to center herself. Despite the morning's events, she maintained perfect composure, hair impeccable, suit unwrinkled, expression confident but neutral. Years of being the only black woman in countless boardrooms had taught her the importance of presentation. The elevator opened directly into a plush reception area where Richard Townsend, Transcontinental CEO, stood waiting with an outstretched hand. Jasmine. Wonderful to finally meet in person, he boomed, his handshake firm and enthusiastic. At 62, Townsend had a full head of silver hair and the robust confidence of someone who'd never been denied entry anywhere. I've been following your work for years. What you've built with Washington Innovations is nothing short of remarkable. Thank you, Richard. I'm looking forward to our discussion. He guided her through double doors into an expansive conference room. 12 people sat around a massive oval table crafted from a single piece of redwood. Large windows offered panoramic views of the bay, while digital displays on the walls showed Transcontinental's current stock price and global operations. "Allow me to introduce our board," Townsend said, leading her around the table. Margaret Chen, our CFO, James Hartfield, Operations, Anita Desai, Legal. Jasmine greeted each board member professionally, noting their reactions. Some seemed genuinely impressed to meet her, others barely concealed their surprise at her age and race, despite her well-known profile in the business world. When everyone was seated, Townsend opened the meeting with typical corporate platitudes about synergy and mutual growth opportunities, before turning the floor over to Jasmine. "Ms. Washington, we're eager to hear your acquisition proposal. The preliminary terms your team shared were intriguing, but we'd like to understand your vision more deeply." Jasmine stood and moved to the presentation screen. For the next 40 minutes, she delivered a masterful overview of her acquisition strategy. She detailed how Washington Innovations would integrate Transcontinental's diverse holdings, the technological enhancements she planned to implement, and the projected 5-year growth metrics. Her presentation was flawless, her responses to questions incisive and confident. Board members exchanged impressed glances as Jasmine concluded her formal presentation. Several began shuffling papers, the preliminary acquisition agreements that needed only signatures to finalize the deal. "Before we proceed to the paperwork," Jasmine said casually, returning to her seat, "I'd like to discuss one of your subsidiary holdings that wasn't emphasized in our previous conversations." "Of course," Townsend replied. "We have numerous subsidiaries. Which one interests you particularly?" "Atlantic Airways," Jasmine stated, watching their faces carefully. Townsend's expression brightened. "Ah yes, one of our more recent acquisitions. Purchased 18 months ago and already showing improved quarterly returns under our management. Their premium routes have been particularly profitable. Are you interested in their corporate travel program for Washington Innovations?" "I'm interested in their corporate culture," Jasmine replied evenly. "Particularly their approach to customer service and staff training." A puzzled look crossed Townsend's face. An unusual focus for an acquisition of this scale, but Atlantic has consistently high customer satisfaction ratings. "We've invested significantly in their service standards." Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. "Would those service standards include removing a confirmed first-class passenger from their seat to accommodate another passenger based solely on appearance?" The room fell silent. Townsend's confusion deepened. "I'm not sure I understand." Without breaking eye contact, Jasmine reached for her tablet and tapped the screen. The large display on the wall came to life, showing crystal-clear video footage of that morning's incident aboard the Atlantic Airways flight. For the next 7 minutes, the Transcontinental board watched in horrified silence as the scene unfolded, Jasmine calmly presenting her boarding pass, Veronica dismissing the evidence, Bradley's contrasting treatment of different passengers, Captain Brooks' immediate assumption of guilt, and Jasmine's dignified exit to economy class. When the video ended, the room remained silent. Margaret Chen, the CFO, had her hand over her mouth. James Hartfield stared at the table. Anita Desai, the legal counsel, was frantically writing notes. Townsend's face had drained of color. "Jasmine, we had no idea." "When did this happen?" "This morning," Jasmine replied calmly. "On my flight here." "My God," Townsend whispered. "I assure you, this is not how Transcontinental operates." "Not at all. We'll investigate immediately and terminate everyone involved." "That's one approach," Jasmine acknowledged. "Though I question whether firing individuals without addressing systemic issues would prevent similar incidents in the future." "What would you suggest?" Townsend asked, relief evident in his voice that she seemed willing to discuss solutions rather than simply walk away from the deal. "A complete overhaul of Atlantic Airways' management structure and mandatory anti-bias training for all staff," Jasmine began. "Additionally, I'd propose establishing a $50 million scholarship fund for minority students pursuing careers in aviation." The board members exchanged concerned glances. Anita Desai leaned toward Townsend. "Richard, we should discuss this privately before." These terms would need to be incorporated into our acquisition agreement, Jasmine continued, sliding a document across the table. My legal team has prepared the necessary amendments. Townsend skimmed the document, his expression growing increasingly troubled. These are significant changes to our agreed terms, Jasmine. The board would need time to consider. Of course, Jasmine replied, standing and gathering her materials. I understand completely. I should mention that I have meetings scheduled tomorrow morning with executives from Global Ventures and Horizon Capital, both of whom have expressed interest in acquiring Transcontinental. Board members shifted uncomfortably. Transcontinental stock had been underperforming for 3 quarters, making them vulnerable to less favorable acquisition terms from competitors. That won't be necessary, Townsend said quickly. Let's discuss your amendments. I'm sure we can reach an agreement today. As board members huddled in whispered conversations, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text notification. It was from her communications director, Atlantic Airways incident trending #1 on social media. Stock down 8% in after-hours trading. Jasmine casually turned her phone toward Townsend, allowing him to glimpse the message. His eyes widened slightly before he turned to the board with newfound urgency. I believe Ms. Washington's proposals have merit and deserve our immediate consideration, he announced. What followed was 2 hours of intense negotiation. Jasmine remained calm and focused throughout, neither raising her voice nor backing down from her core demands. By the time final terms were agreed upon, the Transcontinental board looked simultaneously defeated and impressed. As the revised agreements were being printed for signatures, Jasmine made one final request. I'd like to place a call to Atlantic Airways headquarters. From this room. On speaker. Townsend hesitated only briefly before nodding his consent. Of course. Jasmine dialed the number, which was answered on the second ring by a nervous-sounding executive who clearly recognized her name immediately. This is Jasmine Washington. I'm currently in the Transcontinental Holdings boardroom with CEO Richard Townsend and the entire board of directors, she stated clearly. I wanted to inform you personally that as of approximately 30 minutes from now, when these acquisition papers are signed, Washington Innovations will effectively become your parent company. The silence on the other end was profound. I look forward to working closely with your team on implementing comprehensive changes to your training protocols and service standards, Jasmine continued. My office will be in touch tomorrow to begin that process. As she ended the call, Jasmine turned to find the entire Transcontinental board watching her with expressions ranging from shock to newfound respect. Now, she said, picking up a pen, shall we sign these papers and make our partnership official? The ink was barely dry on the acquisition documents when Richard Townsend attempted to reassert control over the situation. Leaning back in his leather chair with practiced nonchalance, he adopted a tone that had intimidated countless business rivals throughout his career. While I completely understand your concerns about Atlantic Airways, Jasmine, I think we need to be realistic about implementation, he began, steepling his fingers. Overhauling an entire corporate culture takes time. Perhaps we could start with a strongly worded directive and review progress quarterly. Several board members nodded along, apparently relieved by their CEO's attempt to dilute Jasmine's demands into something more manageable, and less expensive. Jasmine allowed the moment to stretch, her expression unreadable as she closed her portfolio with deliberate movements. Then she stood, smoothing her suit jacket. I understand your perspective, Richard. Implementation is always more complex than planning, she agreed mildly. That's why I've already drafted a detailed execution strategy. She walked to the door, opened it, and gestured to her team waiting outside. Angela entered with 3 additional executives from Washington Innovations, the Chief Diversity Officer, the Head of Corporate Training, and the VP of Organizational Development. My team has extensive experience transforming corporate cultures, Jasmine explained as they distributed comprehensive implementation plans to each board member. We've mapped out a 6-month strategy with clear milestones and accountability metrics. Townsend's confident smile faltered. This is quite thorough. Naturally, Jasmine replied. But if you feel it's too ambitious, I certainly understand. My calendar shows I have meetings tomorrow with Horizon Capital and Global Ventures. Both expressed interest when they heard Transcontinental might be hesitant about progressive corporate governance. The implied threat hung in the air. Transcontinental's board members exchanged alarmed glances, fully aware of what competing acquisition offers might mean for their company's future, and their personal stock options. Townsend's phone buzzed insistently. Glancing down, his face paled. "Excuse me for one moment," he muttered, stepping away to take the call. While Townsend was occupied, Jasmine's chief diversity officer addressed the board. "The beauty of our approach is that it's not punitive. We found that blaming individuals without addressing systemic issues is counterproductive. Our goal is transformation, not retribution." Townsend returned, his expression grim. "Our stock is down 12% in after-hours trading," he announced. "The Atlantic Airways incident has gone viral globally. #boycott Atlantic Airways is trending." James Hartfield, the operations director, pulled up the trending hashtag on his tablet and winced. Over 200,000 mentions in the past hour. Media outlets are picking it up now. Margaret Chen, the CFO, was frantically calculating figures. This could impact quarterly earnings significantly if the boycott gains traction. Jasmine's phone chimed with a text message. She read it quickly, then looked up at the increasingly panicked board. "That was interesting timing," she remarked casually. "My team just informed me that Washington Innovations acquired a significant position in Transcontinental shares this afternoon, just before the incident went viral." The revelation landed like a thunderbolt. Anita Desai, the legal counsel, gasped audibly. "You purchased shares knowing this would happen?" "Not at all," Jasmine corrected smoothly. "I purchased shares because I believe in Transcontinental's potential, with proper leadership. The timing was merely fortunate. It was a masterful power move." In one stroke, Jasmine had aligned her financial interests with the board's while demonstrating that she now had significant leverage beyond the acquisition agreement itself. Townsend recovered first, a new respect evident in his expression. "What exactly are you proposing, Jasmine?" "Nothing more than what we've already agreed to," she replied. "Complete implementation of the anti-bias training program across all Transcontinental subsidiaries, establishment of the scholarship fund for minority aviation students, and a restructuring of Atlantic Airways management." She paused, watching their expressions carefully before delivering her final point. "With one addition, I want direct oversight of the Atlantic Airways transformation. Not termination of the staff involved, but something more meaningful." Townsend frowned. "What did you have in mind?" "The flight crew that discriminated against me today will not be fired," Jasmine stated clearly. "Instead, they will become the test case for our new approach. They'll complete the most comprehensive bias training program in the industry, work directly with our diversity initiatives team, and meet regularly with me to discuss their progress." "You want to work with the people who humiliated you?" Margaret Chen asked incredulously. "I want to transform them," Jasmine corrected. "Firing them would be easy, but it wouldn't create lasting change. I'm more interested in building a new model that other companies can follow." The room fell silent as the board members processed her proposal. It was unconventional, ambitious, and, they were beginning to realize, exactly the kind of innovative thinking that had made Jasmine Washington a billionaire. Townsend was the first to nod. "I think that's brilliant, actually." "I agree," Anita Desai added, setting aside her legal pad. "From both an ethical and legal standpoint, this approach mitigates our liability while addressing the root issues." One by one, the other board members signaled their approval. The tide had turned completely. What had begun as an attempt to water down Jasmine's demands had transformed into unanimous support for her vision. As the meeting concluded, Jasmine remained in the boardroom after the others had filed out. Only Richard Townsend lingered, regarding her with a mixture of admiration and wariness. "You knew, didn't you?" he asked quietly. You knew Atlantic Airways was our subsidiary before you even boarded that plane. Jasmine smiled enigmatically. What matters isn't what I knew then, Richard. It's what we do next. With that, she gathered her materials and walked out, leaving Townsend to contemplate how thoroughly she had outmaneuvered not just an airline crew, but an entire corporate board. From the conference room phone, she made one final call before departing, directly to Atlantic Airways headquarters, still on speakerphone so Townsend could hear. This is Jasmine Washington again. I'll be personally overseeing your corporate transformation effective immediately. Please inform Veronica Miller, Bradley Thompson, Tyler Benson, Kimberly Adams, and Captain Raymond Brooks that I look forward to meeting with them tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. sharp. She ended the call and walked out without looking back, leaving Townsend alone with the realization that Jasmine Washington had just executed one of the most sophisticated corporate power moves he'd witnessed in his 40-year career. 6 months later, the grand ballroom of the Atlantic Airways headquarters glittered with elegant decorations for the inaugural Diversity in Aviation Gala. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over hundreds of guests in formal attire, industry executives, educational leaders, and aspiring aviation professionals from underrepresented backgrounds. Near the entrance, working the registration desk with practiced professionalism, stood the former flight crew from Jasmine's infamous flight. Bradley Thompson checked in guests with genuine warmth, while Veronica Miller directed attendees to their tables. Tyler Benson and Kimberly Adams managed the name tags and welcome packets, and Captain Raymond Brooks greeted industry colleagues with handshakes that no longer carried his former arrogance. The transformation in their demeanor wasn't merely superficial. Each had completed over 200 hours of intensive bias training, worked directly with community outreach programs, and participated in weekly reflection sessions with diversity specialists. Most significantly, each had regular one-on-one meetings with Jasmine herself, during which they discussed their progress and insights with surprising candor. Dr. Patil, welcome, Bradley greeted a distinguished South Asian woman. Your panel on inclusive hiring practices is one of the most anticipated events of the evening. Ms. Washington mentioned how much she values your research. Nearby, Emily Parker, now Jasmine's personal assistant after graduating with her computer science degree, coordinated with event staff, occasionally glancing at the registration desk with quiet satisfaction. Her decision to speak up that day on the plane had not only connected her with a powerful mentor but had contributed to industry-wide changes that were already showing measurable results. At precisely 7 p.m., Jasmine arrived in an elegant midnight blue gown, her presence commanding immediate attention without a single word. She moved through the crowd graciously, greeting guests and accepting congratulations for the remarkable transformation of Atlantic Airways, which had recently been recognized with the industry's highest honor for workplace culture. As she approached the registration desk, the former flight crew straightened perceptibly. Their nervousness was still evident, but it now stemmed from respect rather than fear. Good evening, Jasmine greeted them collectively. Everything looks perfect. Thank you, Ms. Washington, Veronica replied, her tone sincere. The response has exceeded our projections. We're at 107% capacity. Excellent. Jasmine nodded approvingly. And the scholarship announcements? Ready for your keynote, Bradley confirmed. The 50 recipients have been notified that they'll be recognized tonight. As Jasmine continued toward the main ballroom, Maxwell Whitfield, the man who had taken her seat months ago, approached with an eager smile, extending his business card before even greeting her. Ms. Washington. Maxwell Whitfield, Whitfield Properties. I've been hoping to discuss potential real estate opportunities with Washington Innovations. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting. Jasmine accepted his card with cool politeness. Mr. Whitfield. Thank you for your interest. My diversity initiatives team would be happy to review your company's inclusion metrics as a first step. I believe they're at table 7 if you'd like to connect with them. Confusion flickered across his face. I was hoping to speak directly with you about investment opportunities. I understand, Jasmine replied evenly. However, my investment decisions are now guided by comprehensive evaluations of corporate culture. My team will be happy to begin that assessment process with your company. Without waiting for his response, Jasmine moved on, leaving Maxwell to contemplate this unexpected barrier to his networking attempt. The evening proceeded flawlessly, with Atlantic Airways executives proudly announcing record profits under their new management philosophy. Industry leaders who had initially been skeptical of Jasmine's approach now clamored to implement similar programs at their own companies. At 9 p.m., Jasmine took the stage for her keynote address. The ballroom fell silent as she surveyed the audience. 6 months ago, I boarded a flight that changed not just my journey that day, but the trajectory of an entire industry, she began. What could have ended with termination notices instead became the catalyst for transformation. She gestured toward the former flight crew, now seated at a prominent table near the stage. These individuals have done the difficult, uncomfortable work of confronting bias and committed themselves to creating a more inclusive industry. Their journey represents what's possible when we choose education over punishment, growth over rejection. As Jasmine continued her speech, she unveiled the newly established Washington Aviation Academy, a state-of-the-art training facility built in her childhood Harlem neighborhood, designed to create pathways to aviation careers for underserved communities. Real change isn't about replacing people, she concluded. It's about transforming systems and creating new opportunities. It's about ensuring that the next generation won't face the barriers that previous generations considered insurmountable. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. Later that evening, as the gala wound down, Jasmine prepared to depart for the airport. Her schedule had her flying to Tokyo for meetings about expanding Washington Innovation's international presence. At the curbside, she found her flight crew waiting beside a company car: Veronica, Bradley, Tyler, Kimberly, and Captain Brooks. "Your flight is prepared, Ms. Washington," Captain Brooks informed her. "We've been assigned as your crew for the Tokyo route." Jasmine studied their faces, finding genuine pride rather than resentment or forced compliance. The systemic changes she had implemented went far beyond superficial training videos or diversity statements. The entire corporate structure had been rebuilt with accountability and inclusion at its foundation. As they drove to the airport, Jasmine opened her laptop to review notes for her Tokyo meetings. On her screen was a draft proposal for her next major initiative: overhauling hiring practices across the entire tech industry, creating pathways for underrepresented groups, and establishing measurable accountability standards for executive teams. At the terminal, she boarded the plane with her crew, noting their flawless professionalism as they prepared for departure. Settling into her first-class seat, Jasmine smiled at the poetic justice of the moment. The same crew that had humiliated her 6 months ago was now part of her personal flight team, transformed not through punishment but through education and opportunity. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Washington," Veronica announced warmly over the intercom as the plane began to taxi. "On behalf of Atlantic Airways, we're honored to have you with us today." As the aircraft lifted into the evening sky, Jasmine gazed out at the city lights below. One incident of discrimination had cascaded into industry-wide transformation. One moment of injustice had birthed new opportunities for countless aspiring professionals. Sometimes, she reflected, the most powerful response to discrimination wasn't revenge, but revolution, changing not just individual minds, but entire systems. As her plane climbed higher into the darkening sky, Jasmine Washington opened her laptop and began drafting her next vision for transformation. Jasmine Washington's story teaches us that true power comes not from retaliation but from transformation. When faced with blatant discrimination, she chose a path that created lasting impact rather than momentary satisfaction. By acquiring the airline's parent company and implementing systemic changes instead of simply firing those who wronged her, she demonstrated extraordinary vision and leadership. The story reminds us that discrimination often persists because systems enable it, not just because individuals perpetuate it. Changing faces without changing structures rarely solves deep-rooted problems. Jasmine recognized this truth and leveraged her position to reform entire organizational cultures rather than simply punishing individual actors. Perhaps most importantly, Jasmine's approach highlights the difference between punishment and accountability. By requiring the flight crew to undergo comprehensive training and work directly with her, she created space for genuine growth and understanding. This restorative approach proved more effective than punitive measures alone could have been. Finally, the story illustrates how positions of power can be used to create opportunities for others. By establishing scholarship funds and building pathways for underrepresented groups, Jasmine ensured that her individual victory became a collective advancement. She transformed a personal humiliation into a platform for empowering countless others. What would you do if faced with discrimination like Jasmine experienced? Would you seek revenge, or would you use it as an opportunity to create systemic change? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it too. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of resilience and triumph in the face of adversity, and don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to see how discrimination can be transformed into positive change. Thank you for watching, and remember, in your own life, you always have the power to turn painful experiences into platforms for progress, just like Jasmine did. Your story matters too.